Greetings, nerds. This is CNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. How you doing this Thursday evening?
I'm doing great. It's Thursday evening, so one
Exactly.
more
Yeah.
day closer to Saturday.
Yes. One more day closer to the weekend. It's been a fast week actually.
Yeah, knock on wood. Tomorrow better not drag on.
So of course I just jinxed it now. So tomorrow will be the longest day ever.
No, I got too many meetings tomorrow for it to be a
Yeah.
long day. Oh man, it's interesting because today we don't have a lot of news items to discuss, but we do have 3 shows. That's right, 3 shows to talk about as schedules are adjusted and new shows are discovered. So we will get all into that. But first, according to headlines this week, Oscars plan to move ahead and change the eligibility rules for streaming movies and combine some categories.
Yeah. So obviously things have been turned upside down because of COVID, and they did a one-time dispensation to allow for films that were originally going to be scheduled for theatrical release, but instead went to a streaming service, uh, will be eligible for the Oscars this year. So, I mean, I guess one recent example of that is the Trolls movie, where it was intended to be put in the theater, but of course I think it went straight to, was it Hulu or Amazon Prime? I can't remember which one.
Oh, I have no idea. I don't follow Trolls.
I don't. I mean, it was just something when I read the article about this change, it was the movie that they referenced because it could qualify for like the animated category.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my mind around how this is an eligibility change, but I guess even movies that went straight to Netflix, there were still some theatrical releases. So
Yeah,
okay.
because that's the normal rule. So normal rule is you have to have at least I think a 1 week theatrical run, and so that's how, like, for example, the Irishman and Roma were able to, even though they were released on those streaming platforms, they did have a limited theatrical release, so that's why they were eligible for the Oscar.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it'll be interesting. We're in still this weird state of limbo as things continue to change and get moved around, and a lot of uncertainty about when things will quote unquote go back to normal or start transitioning to the new normal. So
I think the new normal. I mean, I know because even though some states like Georgia are open up movie theaters, I know some of the major chains are like, until there are new films to be released, they're just not going to reopen their theaters. And even when they do reopen, obviously I probably be they'll be socially distant, because even before, when they were starting to do the rent scale down to close, they were already putting those rules into place. So the movie-going experience will definitely be different moving forward.
speaking of socially distant, in a very rare interview, Grant Gustin sat down, social distancing appropriately, and spoke with Michael Rosenbaum on his podcast, Inside of You. I've actually listened to a different interview with Grant Gustin, I think with Aisha Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
She had a podcast a few years ago and brought him on, Stephen Amell and Emily Beck Ricards on.
Yeah.
So a lot of what he said during his podcast or his interview with Michael, not surprised. I think that it is so interesting, the differences between him and Stephen Amell and how they parallel the differences between their two characters.
Yeah. That was a real thing that stood out to me as well, is that, clearly they're totally two different personalities. Stephen's definitely more gregarious on social media. Grant's more reserved, and it was interesting to see Grant talk about his issues with anxiety, and of course Stephen with his famous panic attack on Michael's show late last year, and then coming back earlier to finish it. But yeah, it just like we see with the characters they play on TV, it's the same with how their real life personalities are.
Yeah, I guess I took more away from Stephen Amell though, because the fact that he had a panic attack during it, and also this was his second time, and so you could go back and listen to his first interview and just see the contrast between two different points in his life, and the fact that Arrow had just ended. So there was a lot more emotions, which made that be such an authentic, vulnerable moment. Where with Grant, I'm not trying to take away anything he talked about. However, I felt as if he is so shy, and he has every right to be that way and reserved, and his personal life is his personal life. But it never delved into that next level of, wow, I could re-listen to this 5 times and find something new. It felt very standard and on par with a regular interview.
Yeah. I mean, and we've talked about Michael's interview style and how it's almost like a therapy session for himself as much as for his guests, and he uses that as a way to get people open. I mean, Grant did open up a little bit more than I've seen him in the standard EW type interview settings, where he did talk about some of his insecurities and anxieties, but definitely not to the level of more just acknowledging that he's dealt with it, but again, just by his very nature, being a very reserved, shy person, he was very reserved. Because even like when I think about Brandon Routh's interview on Inside of You, of course, Brent is kind of started out with that kind of high level, standard interview, but then when he really got into it, discussing about how he ended up being written out of Legends of Tomorrow, it did get more depth. But one part of the interview I did find fascinating was Grant's discussion about the longevity of the show and being locked into the 7-year contract, and that if he had a shorter term contract after, say, season 2 or 2 in particular, he did say it could have been possible that he would have left because he was just so emotionally drained by the whole experience from the first 2 years of the show.
Yeah. I think this is one of the issues where we're going to just disagree, because again, in re-listening to Stephen Amell's interviews, both of them, they go through that. I've listened to the interview between Michael and Tom Welling, and they talk about it too. That is Michael Rosenbaum shtick.
Yeah.
He always brings that up. He brings that up for anybody, especially if they are from a superhero TV show. He will bring that in because he lived it, and that's his experience, and that's how he's able to relate to his guests. I get it. Yeah. So to me, it felt just, again, on par. I've heard it before. I'm not trying to take away from that anything. Am I unhappy that I wasted an hour and listened to it? No. I mean, Grant Gustin is a very recluse celebrity who doesn't, and he talks about that for a little bit. Doesn't really get into the exact reasons why, but you take what you can get from him. Stephen Amell has no fear, and also puts everything almost to a detriment. Out there. So,
that's true.
So it's just very, very different. So,
it was.
If anybody is interested, we do again encourage you to listen to those podcasts. Speaking of podcasts, something else that dropped this week was Ben Bateman from Schmodown fame started a new channel called Nerds in Suits, and a lot of his episodes are about conversations and interviewing a lot of his colleagues and friends in that YouTube space. He sat down with Christian Harloff. I listened to that episode. I'm going to listen to his interview with Dan Murrell.
Yeah,
I think that's a good one to check out if you are into Schmodown. Again, Christian Harloff, I have listened to since 2014. So I know all of his stories. Nothing new from that interview, but Ben Bateman is a pretty good interviewer, I have to say.
Yeah, speaking of people who from the Schmodown and that universe of YouTube celeb personalities, Dan Murrell is another person who he's left Screen Junkies and has dropped his own new YouTube channel, and so I've watched his explanation as far as why he left Screen Junkies, and I know he's been on with John Roca and explored a little bit more about that with him. And then also, he's a big Star Trek fan, so of course, whenever he dropped his Picard recap, I definitely did watch it, and it was I agree with a lot of points, disagreed with some, but it was just, it's just interesting seeing the transition with a lot of these personalities in the YouTube space as far as geekdom and entertainment media, and a lot of folks spinning off on their own, either due to such changes like what happened with Collider, or in Dan's case, where I think he just wanted to have some more creative freedom.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because I was able to get through this Monday's episode of SEN Live, but it was hosted by John Roca.
I couldn't make it. I tried. I like Roca, but
Christian Harloff is not good. He is not in the right mind. I cannot watch that show anymore. I am, even though I'm not like 100% loving Schmodown, and it's having its own scheduling issues because of COVID, I still think that Backstage is a great podcast to listen to. The 2 hours long, 2 hours plus, they get a lot of good guests these days and a lot of very interesting perspectives on not only Schmodown, but just the YouTube space and movies in general. And so I tend to very much listen to that and look forward to every new episode that they drop.
Cool. I'll have to. I didn't realize Ben had done that. So thanks for the tip. I will definitely that will be on my listening rotation tomorrow, because I definitely need to change up some of the rotation. Some things are getting a little bit stale. So I'm glad you dropped that one.
Speaking of changing up the rotation, my segues are on point tonight, people.
Yes they are.
Batwoman is back. I forgot. I did not realize, Will, how much I love this show.
Yeah.
Because did I miss it? Not really. Am I glad that it's back? Yes. This show, I don't know how this was all decided, but it is very fortunate where the episode that they last aired in March ended the way it did, with Alice being locked up in Arkham after a betrayal from Kate, and able to start it with this episode, which the first 20 minutes are all exposition and reminding you about all the very different plot threads they have going on this season. I love that. Something that also didn't stood out to me, but I found myself watching this episode at the end when the credits start rolling. Carolyn Dryers, she is from the Vampire Diaries fame. She executive producer, written and everything. She's also a lesbian. And I didn't know that until I fell down a Twitter rabbit hole, and when I realized that, I just said, I'm not saying that you have to have that kind of parallel or have to have a certain sexuality, have a certain look about you in order to be able to tell a story. But the moment I found that out, I just thought to myself, and I said, yeah, this show and the way it's written and the way that they use Kate's sexuality,
Mhm.
it makes so much more sense. And that's how I think they're able to find that sense of authenticity with these characters.
Yeah, it definitely. You're right. I completely agree with you that shows up. She sets the tone, and it carries through in the writers' room and through to the screen because of Ruby, and also just Ruby's own sexuality, sexual orientation. So, yeah, I completely agree with you, and sometimes you do need to have that perspective sometimes to be able to tell a story.
Right.
Not saying that you have to, but if you live something, you can definitely come at it from a different place than just observing something.
Right. And thank you. It's just, we're not saying it's required. We're just saying that more often than not, it elevates the material. When
Yeah,
you're able to get people behind the camera who have actually had those experiences. They're not Batwoman. They're not jumping from tower to tower or anything, and there's no spotlight. But the pathos of that character dealing with that identity issue just allows them to better be able to portray that because they've experienced that for themselves.
Yeah, and I know we'll talk about the Flash in a bit, and we've seen that similar vein with Candace Patton since Eric Wallace has taken over as showrunner for the Flash, and some of the ways that she's portrayed as an African American woman.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. Another interesting TVD connection is Paul Wesley directed this episode.
Yeah, I saw that he was the director, and I really liked the direction of this episode. It was very smartly shot, from the action sequences to just the emotional beats. It like you said, coming back, it made me realize that, okay, this is one of the better superhero shows on TV right now.
Yep, I agree with that. I was pretty much engaged the full time. I did skip a little bit of Mouse and Alice just because you knew where that was going. I was whatever, 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there. But everything they were doing with Kate and the PTSD and the fear of crossing a line, and man, did they drop the biggest Batman, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming. And so, Will, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne has been missing for 5 years.
That's correct.
Okay. And we find out in this episode that the Joker has been, quote unquote, locked up in Arkham for 5 years.
So we thought.
So was everyone's thought. And a character who had a lot to do with this episode and really elevated his game, Luke, informs Kate at the very end that she was not the first to betray the Batman code.
Right.
5 years ago. I.e., Bruce left because he also was experiencing his own PTSD from that.
Yeah. I mean, that bombshell. We were wondering if they would ever get around to explaining why Bruce left Gotham, and even though it wasn't directly said, I mean, it was so implied that yes, Bruce did kill the Joker, and so that was definitely a bombshell that I definitely did not see coming. The other thing, as far as Kate's PTSD, I hope it's not a one-off, because so often utilizing the PTSD is just a storytelling trope, and we'll do it for this one episode, and then the hero will overcome it because Luke's sharing with her that you weren't the first bat to kill someone. And then she, all of a sudden, like, oh, snaps out of it and moves on and doesn't have to deal with consequences of what happened with Cartwright.
Right.
I'm hoping that they will, and I know we only have one episode left this season because of the shortened production schedule, but I do hope that they do carry that forward some next week and in subsequent episodes, where she still has those panic attack moments of dealing with the consequences of her actions, and so that it will continue to help drive her growth as a superhero.
I have a feeling it's going to be a one-off. However, I will say that in this episode, I got some significant Dark Knight vibes.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Because it was all about heroes and villains and that very gray line that separates the two. So much so that the main antagonist in the episode was the detonator who plots his victims, who goes after quote unquote heroes of public service, and does the ship.
It was totally the ship moment from The Dark Knight. Yeah, I mean it was just like, okay, let's just so since The Dark Knight, Kate's off, and then we have all these, she's inspired these pretender bats.
Yeah, thank you. That too. It was just so classic Dark Knight. I could not get over it. All that was missing was a clown running around. Oh wait, he's dead.
He's dead.
But that being said, and we've mentioned this in past discussions about Batwoman, they are able to make it so familiar and very reminiscent of other iterations of this lore, but not to an extent where I'm checked out. I've seen this before. I know how the story ends. No, this is another version. It's a retelling that, yes, it's hitting similar beats, but it's also talking about it in very different ways. It's also dealing with other characters. So I mean, for me personally, Dark Knight is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Same here.
So I didn't mind it. It was just very interesting how I wasn't expecting it. So I loved all of that. I will say that one of my issues with this episode is how it kind of felt as if it spent the first 20 minutes reminding us about all the different plot threads that were going on, whether it had to do with Kate, whether it had to do with the Lucius Fox murder from the perspective of his son versus the perspective of Sophie trying to figure out who killed Lucius Fox. And then you have Julia Pennyworth involved, and all these different characters. And yet the detonator was not only able to be the episode of the week villain, but also the answer to pretty much all of these different mysteries.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was the answer to a lot of the questions as far as what is driving a lot of the story for this season. And I mean, it was good. I mean, but they still left it. They still left some things on the table. They still didn't really get into what was so specific in Fox's journals that Tommy Elliott hired Robles to.
I thought it was the tech.
Well, there was a tech, but what was it going to do with the tech? And so they still left some areas to explore there.
Yeah.
And we also learned a little bit more why Jacob Kane founded the Crows, as far as the feeling the need to protect the city, and of course what I really liked is how they brought forward Tommy Elliott from earlier in the season,
Mm-hmm.
and really tying it back to, the whole Batman lore is all just like many superhero origin stories, is wrapped up in trauma, and using Bruce Wayne's childhood friend to be to be the force behind one of Bruce's deepest confidants, and Lucius. Also, it wouldn't surprise me if that has some connection to him killing the Joker 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it opens up so many various avenues of storytelling for them for subsequent seasons. That this one of the problems with shows a lot of times is they just plot along and don't carry the plot forward. Well, this episode carried things forward in so many ways. I hate that the season's going to get cut short because there's just so many things that they could explore
Right.
in this series. And I also wanted to go back to one of your points you were making about the Dark Knight and the Batman lore, and I think this show, whenever we first started talking about it at the beginning of this season, was how they treated Batman, and I think they have found peace as far as thematically how they treat the character.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seemed at the beginning of the show they were just overcompensating about Kate being better than Batman. Kate, I don't want to say better, but they were just overcompensating things as far as her being Batwoman, and just so over the top. I don't want to say over the top, but just like we had, they're making so on the nose about things.
Right.
And now they're like, okay, here's how we can weave this creator lore into our story and tell our own unique story, and show, they've made peace with how to utilize Bruce Wayne, and the best way, and the drop of him being probably the main reason why he left Gotham was killing the Joker, and using that as a way to help Kate deal with her killing Cartwright, shows how you can use Batman and Bruce Wayne as a way to help further Kate's story and Kate's journey without having to denigrate Batman.
Right. And just to go on top of that, in this episode, the writers also are doing a very good job, an exceptional job, on setting up circumstances where the characters who have been hiding secrets, or who, for dramatic irony purposes, are suddenly forced to reveal those items. And Mary, a few episodes ago, realized Kate was Batwoman.
Mm-hmm.
And they strung that along. And I didn't mind it, because I thought that what they did was unique, different, and added character or dimension to Mary. Mm-hmm. And in this episode, the circumstances, she just says, no, I have to call you out on this. I can't pretend to be ignorant anymore.
Yeah.
Because the circumstances dictate that I tell you, wake up. Mm-hmm. And keep moving. And Mary also just always shines in those moments, because the dialogue they give her is not cliche.
Yeah.
It always speaks really directly to the issues, and allows viewers to hear it in a new way that brings a lot of gravitas. So I think, to your point, that the writers are also doing a great job in that regard as well.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they have definitely made. Yeah, I mean, all the supporting characters on this show have really had their good moments. I think Luke in particular has really grown over the last few episodes. Especially since post-crisis. As we've learned more about his father's death, and things like little nods to his character in the comics. I mean, him being a boxer, and you know, those little side elements they showed this week with his character. So yeah, I mean, I hate that there's only one episode left in this season, because I've really enjoyed the growth of this show as it's progressed over the first season.
Yes. And as we've finished talking about a show that probably is the one who really benefited from Crisis and the events of Crisis, let's move on to The Flash, which I don't know if you can say they benefited from Crisis.
Yeah.
No, this wasn't a bad episode of The Flash. I have to say it was not bad. I'm still over at least probably 30 to 40% of these episodes these days, and the various plot lines that they have going on, because I think that they have always struggled with how they utilize characters. That being said, a lot of Barry and Iris, a lot of realizations. Thank God Barry went down that conspiracy spiral.
Oh yeah, that was great.
Realized.
Yeah. Actually, I like this week's episode. The going down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole. I think I saw a couple like reactions on Twitter or some other reviews somewhere where they had the conspiracy, the Always Sunny meme. Mm-hmm. You know, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that like was captured in this episode, and it you know, I think, you know, as I mentioned last week, I think part of the problem that has hurt this show has been pacing, and it really gets exacerbated when you have the delays, either due to production gets behind or because of COVID, causing the month-long hiatus. Because this week I did finally feel that the story is moving forward in a significant way.
Right.
And so, it's almost would have been. I don't know if it would have been better for if this show had been the one to bring them back, like we saw with Batwoman this week, to really move the story along forward. Because last week I felt like they were just kind of treading water. This week we really got somewhere as far as, Barry making a realization and of Mirror Iris, and Iris in the mirror dimension with Eve McCulloch, figuring out, all this time there's this button here that all I had to do was push and go into this other room to find the mirror generator.
That bothered me so much.
Yeah. That was a weak point for sure for me, but her reaction when she got into the room, and just the mental anguish that, I don't know, I guess Eve's controlling the mirror version of Iris, overwhelmed her while she was in that creation room. And the other thing too that I'm wondering is where are the real Sing and real Camilla, like, tucked away in this mirror universe?
Well, that's what you're supposed to wonder at the end of the episode, because I don't know why we didn't think about that last week, where we're like, wait a second, Iris has been in there for a while. Why hasn't she come across Sting or Camilla?
Yeah, exactly.
Have we been watching this show?
Yeah. And I guess that's what I was getting to about my point about pacing, and it's just the feeling of the lack of cohesion sometimes with this plot that they've built this in 6B. Yeah. Because having all these starts and stops, it's hard to keep track. It's hard. Yeah. I just forget. It's hard to stay invested because of it. So there's that. But Candace brought it this week. I mean, I think this has probably been some of the strongest performances she's given in this series over a 6-year run. I mean, in particular, the way Mirror Iris.
She's a reflection.
Yeah, no,
Or
no,
call her Fake Iris.
fake Iris. Yeah, fake Iris. The way when when Barry had that moment with her to just help her gain control away from Eva, and the way she played that scene of like this character just becoming self-aware and self-actualized to free herself from that, I thought was probably one of the better scenes I've seen in a long time on the show.
I agree. I think that Candace finally had something to work with, and I think that's why. And I've actually seen that since they put her on this path of running this investigation and finding herself now on the other side, looking on the outside looking in. But she finally gets an opportunity to play two characters, two versions of herself, and I thought it was really clever to make that clarification for us viewers that these are reflections, which just makes in my mind this whole idea of like, okay, now I get how to an extent, if this is a reflection of Iris, meaning it's a version of her where she is able to pull the wool over everyone's eyes for a little bit because she's a reflection. She is an image of her and has all of this knowing, but at the same time she's not alive, so she doesn't fully understand love or that human connection. So I think everything they did in that extent made sense. I still don't really understand that room and why there's so much suffering and pain and how that relates to mirrors. I don't get it. I also don't understand how exactly Eva's feelings and her pain and her trauma can be used to overwhelm the reflections and make them deteriorate. But very cool images. This is a very science fiction story, and I think to your point, Will, Flash does well when it does steer into the scientific realm, and not so much the cliche superhero saving the day, like not the Arrow way,
right?
Because Arrow never got science fiction on us. They went mystical. They did a lot of street level fighting and all that stuff, but the Flash, it every time it tries to go that direction, I don't think it works, but it really does work when it goes into the science fiction genre.
Totally, and yeah, and that really worked well, like with Eva and bringing back Bloodwork.
Yes, I liked how they brought him back.
Yeah,
but not really, because there are easier ways for him to get out.
It was a bit involved in contrived method of like using the mirrors, but wait,
okay. Yeah. One thing about Bloodwork,
I
could not get over how much and how I did not realize it, but he is just Venom.
Yeah. Yeah. The effects team, and makeup team, they need to, they could have like thought of another way to separate the two, because I do think of Venom too when I see it, but but the thing about how they brought him back and also how they utilized, I was wondering like how they were going to utilize David Singh's mirror image, fake David. It's all starting to come together. And to your point, using it in that science fiction-y way that the Flash excels at, really gives, it stays true to itself in their storytelling. And so, so whenever it got to that point of the show this week, I was really drawn in because, and realized how all the things we saw in 6A with blood work, building up to this point was like, okay, now I get why they picked this particular character and how he fits into 6B with Eva needing his plasma abilities to be able to get out of the mirror universe. So again, to your point, utilizing those science fiction elements definitely served the story well this week, and really connected 6A and 6B in a very, very good fashion.
Yeah. And like I said, I did not hate this episode. However, when you're competing against Batwoman, it's hard for me to give you all the awards. It really is.
Yeah, no, Batwoman definitely was the superior episode this week. But I will say The Flash, I mean, it was, this was one episode that when I look back at season 6, it will definitely stand out as one of the ones I enjoyed very much. And even Cecile's role this week, it served a good purpose, and it didn't like go off. They used Nash in a good sense. We didn't have any unnecessary scenes with Allegra, and the only place where it was kind of like they could have like probably put on the cutting room floor was the whole Caitlin. Obviously they're trying to work around a pregnancy. I get that, but that was just some valuable screen time, that story that could have probably waited another episode or so. I mean, maybe it's just kind of pointless to me.
Yeah, exactly. Pointless, out of left field. WTF? Why? And why? And you can only give them that excuse. They're trying to work around a pregnancy. Okay. Yeah. Well, you know what? Carlos Ramon has never been pregnant, but he tends to be able to get written off the show at a whim.
Yeah.
So there are ways. There are also an actress being pregnant on a TV show when her character is not pregnant. Not something new. Okay, right, happens all the time. It's called make her carry a giant bag filled with her Killer Cross gear.
Exactly. Shoot different angles. You've done it already this season. So I mean, they could have easily, if they needed to work it in, she could have gone and visited her mom, or gone to some conference, any number of like plausible things, instead of this weird like she's in hibernation story that doesn't make sense. And hopefully we'll get some resolution or some purpose for it in the remaining, I guess, 2 episodes. But
don't hold your breath on it.
Yeah.
They never do Caitlin justice.
Yeah.
They did her justice in season 3. I will to your point about how certain episodes of The Flash do tend to rise to the top when you look at the seasons as a whole. The episode, I think it's 3-7, where she finally embraces Killer Frost, or Killer Frost comes over, directed by Kevin Smith. Yep. One of my favorite episodes of Flash of all time. And definitely. I still think about that episode. And anytime we have to rag on her storylines, which is a lot, I always have that episode playing in my mind, because they could have done so much more. And that's why we have to call it out, because it's such a disservice for what that episode set up.
Yeah, it is. But we'll hopefully season 7 they will finally figure out how to treat this character, because it's so schizophrenic at times, and it's hard. I mean, it's hard as a viewer. I can't imagine how Danielle feels about it sometimes as portraying a character. If you ever got her an off the record moment where you could learn about it, but but it was
get her on Inside of You.
Yeah, there we go. Michael Rosenbaum, if you're listening, invite Danielle Baker to your show. But yeah, I enjoyed the episode, and and the close this week was quintessential emotional Flash. I mean, that I did get a little lump in my throat with Barry and Iris, that last moment of them reaching out into the universe to find each other and say they're going to fight for themselves and stuff. I mean, that again, they do science fiction well, and they do the lightning rod very well too, in my opinion. So, and I thought it really worked this week.
It would have had they not run this is the end of the episode, and I'm just looking at the time code thinking, why the heck do we have 5 minutes left if this is the end of the episode? And then you go back and it just goes on and on. I love you, finish their sentences, blah blah blah. I get it, but in my mind, I was wanting so much more. You left a 5-minute teaser.
Yeah.
Why wasn't that part of the episode? And maybe at the very end, give me an Eobard Thawne reference. I don't know. It was very bizarre to me. But speaking about love and doing chemistry, right? Yeah. Our last show is brand new. Well, the 3rd episode has aired of the 1st season, run on HBO. Merritt Wever and Donald Gleason.
There you go. Yeah, I wasn't going to touch that because I know I always mess up his first name.
There is a podcast that I recorded all the way back in 2015 where I was able to say his name. I don't know what has happened. Billy. I'll just call him Billy.
Let's call him Billy. Yep.
I love this show so much.
It's good. Yeah.
So this show, and I'm sorry, Will, you'll get probably like 1 minute to talk about.
That's fine. Go
ahead.
Yeah.
I realized in this particular most recent episode why this show works for me, and it's because of a trilogy called the Before Trilogy by Richard Linklater. Are you familiar with those films?
I'm not.
Ethan Hawke. Okay. So there are 3 movies, before sunset, before sunrise, before midnight. I forget the actress name, but Ethan Hawke is one of the main characters, filmed like decades apart from one another, and it's so fascinating to watch these movies because the first one, 2 strangers meet on a train, spend a night in Paris together. That's it. Second movie, these 2 strangers find each other again, very different points in their lives. And they've always held on to that one night they had together. Mm-hmm. Third movie, even further into this relationship and what has happened. So it's just this weird progression. And there are literal images in this most recent episode where the second movie, it's like shot for shot for me. And I'm like, how did they get away with this? And it's very different, though. I'm not saying the dialogue is the same, but the same idea of the shot in particular I'm talking about is when they're on the boat, and he talks about how she was right for breaking up with him, and then she spills her reality and what she's truly running away from, and this idea that in college she had it all, and then after college has been nothing but downhill and kind of finding herself in this relationship that she's always wanted out of, but it's also worked in her favor. Anyways, that is very similar to one of my favorite scenes in Before Sunset.
Cool.
So essentially, this show is so much more comedic.
Yeah.
And it's also it has a lot of Irish accents in it, which I adore. I adore a good Irish accent. And there's something about the way this is written where I find that I can rewatch episodes, and when I realize something about the characters, then I rewatch the episode and it makes the dialogue make so much more sense, or why they interacted in a way. Merritt Wever's character in particular has a lot of dimensions, and it's really hard to understand why she does things or says something. And then when you realize that, oh, she's the best liar, or she can lie and look like she's telling the truth, you realize what's really going on.
Yeah, yeah.
I hope you cut all that out because it made zero sense.
I'm gonna leave it in because it made total sense. Because that's what you just said perfectly captures Ruby.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, when we first are introduced to this character, she's in a parking lot, and listened to this song, and it was I'm blanking on the name of the song now, but it was like when I was like, am I watching the correct show? When I first started, but then and then of course the whole premise is the characters basically, when they were in college, said if you ever get a text with "run," you respond to it, and they would meet. They would meet in their predestined place, designated place to meet up. And so, yeah, she gets the text, and then they both end up on the train, and I know we talked about this show before, and I'm glad I finally I did watch it and got on, because it really is you have two characters who are trying to come to a realization that in her case, she has a lot of unfulfilled dreams, and she lived this fake life, and she's married and kids, and it's almost like the grass is greener kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
And Billy, he's a motivational speaker, and we get his backstory and how he ended up, he's on the run from his, from, I assume is his manager, and she's trying to track him down, and the title just really does, the name of the show really captures these characters. They're just running from their lives, and
yep.
and seeing, and each episode we learn more about them, and how they end up responding to each other's text, instead of just like realizing that they haven't moved on from college.
Well, I think they did move on, but there's also, to your point, each episode we learn not just more about why they did this and why the first episode plays out the way it does, but also there's so much history between them.
Yeah, and I guess
because the most recent episode we see she texted Run 12 years ago.
Yes, yeah.
On a very important day, and well, they didn't run away together because he didn't respond, but I think, and the fact that her mom even knew why she had her phone out. There was a subtle hint there of, has he texted yet?
Yeah.
And so there that's what I like, is that because it's such a condensed half hour, and it really is a small show, you really are mainly with these two characters and maybe one or two other people the whole time. It goes by really quickly, and you're not constantly, it's not a lot of exposition. It's just enough to make the revelations in present day make more sense.
Right. And the thing that also, and it makes more sense. And I guess the thing that is also very captivating about this show is, put yourself. It's one of those things where as you're watching it, you can put yourself in that circumstance. Like, there's old relationships or old things that people, some people move on. Even if you do move on, you may sometimes find yourself thinking, well, what if, the what if factor, and and in this show, the what if, when they get that text, I mean, like you said, 12 years prior on a very significant day, she didn't respond to it. This time she did. And now that they're back together in this situation where they're on the run, they do start to see how things possibly could have played out for them, and they wax nostalgic about their relationship, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and so it does, when you watch it, it does, like, you do have that moment like, I wonder, if I were in that situation, what would I do?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, on that note, that is it for us tonight. Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Will M. Polk, WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at SNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. But most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.